All right, guys, welcome. We are so excited. Blast Softball's here at the NFCA virtual convention.
We are super lucky today to have Lincoln Martin join us. We are going to have some great conversation and dialogue about Blast, the experience,
how to coach to Blast, how to enhance and analyze your players, and overall have a great journey. I could say a lot of great things about Lincoln. I'm going to save that for after you introduce yourself, Lincoln, but I'm SARI August. I'm with Blast Softball here. Lincoln, can you go ahead and introduce yourself for anyone that may not know you in the softball space and give us a little rundown on what you do?
Thanks, Eric, for having me. I'm Lincoln Martin. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I do player development, mostly hitting and defense, and I'm fortunate to train a lot of pretty talented young players, amateurs, all the way to college players and pros. So try to make them better, try to get some kids to hit.
This is my analogy for you, Lincoln. Lincoln is the doctor. So I want to kind of tap into that brain and understand how you get players to connect, how you get coaches to take this piece and connect it to that piece. And so some of those questions is just overall Blast. How did you jump into the Blast bubble, and what is it about assessing players and being able to analyze them that has kind of allowed you to develop your players? So I'm going to go ahead and just kick off the first question, Lincoln, is when you think of Blast, how have you applied that to the way you develop your hitters, and what's that journey been like?
I joined Blast like kind of in the beginning, pretty much based on a thing that I thought good hitters did when I met one of the software developers. They kind of talked to me about something called, like I just referred to it as an elite pattern load. And he was like, we can measure that. And I thought that was pretty neat. So it kind of captured my attention right there. And then from there, started using, Blast in my work and really just trying to understand like how to apply like the numbers or to make things match. But I always think I was kind of like a perfect guy, I think, because I never had to build a hitter from like data or information. Everything we've ever done has just been like old school grinding it out. So I think when I come in, I was a little bit protected in the perspective that I just use Blast to tell me information of things. And you talk about like being able to connect the dots. When I work with a hitter, I literally spend a bunch of time pretty much just watching how they operate, like how they walk and talk, handle themselves in environment, kind of the DNA of a player. For example, like if you have a player who is naturally a mover, they're never gonna be good in a style where they can't move.
No, I love
If
it.
you if you have a kid who's not a mover, they're also never going to be successful when you're trying to get them to do big moves. It kind of has to fit who they are as a person. So when I started using Blast, I would pay attention to like what numbers said in regard to something that I was seeing. So I was always trying to apply, okay, this swing is really cutting balls in this area or that area. And then I would notice that the connection numbers would change based on the way they use their arms. And if I can scroll to how I use it today, it's actually really different. I usually start off just to get a snapshot of what the swing looks like from a number standpoint. Like, are their body getting to a good place? Like, what the bat's doing? And then once I kind of assess that, then I literally go to work to try to make them move better. Because over my time and experience with Blast, there was a time when I would really try to affect the number. And I'm telling you, the more I use it now, the less I do that. The more I focus on them moving better, moving more efficiently, and moving kind of within what they have DNA wise. I've been amazed at like when I'll put the Blast sensor back on, I'll see numbers change. And now it leads me to know that if you get them to move better, Blast will simply tell you like how well the body's setting up to take the swing, not how good they are as a hitter.
And you are such a good advocate of not letting the numbers affect how you coach, but allowing the numbers to continue to ensure that you're doing the right thing. And just when you need that extra layer to check that number. And I think, can you speak to those coaches that jump into the blast experience expecting that hitter to have that perfect plane score?
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest danger they can do is to chase a number. It's natural because the good numbers or the good scores make us feel like we're doing good work. But I think we have to also know what a good swing looks like and works like. And sometimes I have examples of kids who come in and they got really high rotation, but I think they have a bad load pattern, and it causes them to get into their shoulders, or it causes them to compensate because of certain things they're doing, not because of blast or because of what rotation is, because of what they do. And so we take that away from them and their rotation number goes down. Well, 6 months later, it comes back up, but they have a better load pattern. It's easier, it's more repeatable, it's more in line, and it doesn't give away things at the start of their swing. Because I think maybe there's something that happened that they've been manipulated. And so knowing how to coach that is important. So, like, when you chase a number, you run the risk of putting things ahead of themselves. Like, sometimes you have to let things kind of work themselves out with the swing. And the danger when you have it sometimes is that you can go in there and you can manipulate a bat angle or something else, but it also affects the timing of a load piece. And there's a give and take. So I think that there's times when you may have to change an angle, and knowing when to do that is the key. So, like, I would say to the coaches who are just getting it is just do the work. Let the numbers tell you that where things could be going on. Troubleshoot, play with things, make adjustments and those things, but don't do it to a point where you start trying to manipulate a score, because I think you're going to give up way more in the long run.
You're speaking to my soul, because I obviously am very close to this because I'm having conversations every single day with all different types of coaches that know hitting, coaches maybe that are a little bit insecure of hitting. I myself, just talking about my playing experience, I was overcoached. And one thing that I'm so amazed by is we've already been talking for 6-7 minutes and not once have you used the word mechanics. You're talking about movement. And I love how you are connecting this world for us, because people jump into blast. They see their best hitter potentially having average on score, below average connection, below average rotational acceleration, and they're associating those numbers with mechanics, right? Instantly, like, I got to go fix something. There's something broken. And so when you are seeing those players that may be All-Americans, maybe Olympians, you work with such a variety, or coaches that are constantly competing in the World Series. How are you advising them and mentoring them through those poor numbers, maybe, let's just say, or like those weak numbers? How are you correlating that information and letting them stay the course, evaluating the player, but developing the hitter?
The biggest thing I do is that I start finding out what it is that they do to make them successful, right?
Yeah.
They may have a little bit of problem with early connection, but their skill level or their innate ability to adapt with their body and get things to line up at contact, like, that gap between the two gets really shortened because of their natural ability to get to somewhere. So when I see that, I usually start trying to understand where and why, what they do to have success. For example, if someone's has a really early connection that's kind of low, but the way that their approach is, like, for example, as a USA player, for me, sometimes has low connection because the barrel gets really flat early, which would tell me she would have trouble down in the strike zone. But if you talk to her about her approach down in the strike zone, her thought process of kind of working inside out literally takes the angle away and causes the bat to work kind of in a way where she can have success. That's hard. That's internal. that's something that she's able to do simply built into what her the way she thinks and the way she approaches things, that allows her to have success in a more wide range when someone else could have some limitations simply because they can't connect the other dots. So I use it to pretty much tell me what they're doing to be successful. And also, most of those hitters have a crazy ability to repeat what numbers they do over and over and over and over and over. They're not green, red, yellow, green, red, yellow, all over the place. They're yellow every swing, all the time, every day. And that's workable. Like, I can work within that. If it's what they do, they repeat the crap out of it. And that's kind of what happens with a lot of the high level hitters. They may not be in all greens, but what they do, they repeat it every time.
You're someone that's been with us for 3 years. You've been on this journey with us, since day one. How do you hone in the expectations of the coach that's starting today, a little intimidated with technology? And then how do you compare that to the coach that's 3 years in?
Yeah, just put the sensor on and work. Let it record swing, gain information, pay attention to what you see, and then start letting your eyes learn what good angles look like or certain things. I have kids at time, pretty good hitter, going to a major program, who I'm watching swing in a cage and I'm watching the connection numbers tell me that it's in red some, and I'm like, this isn't correct. I'm like, her body's in a great spot. The bat's doing what it's supposed to do. And I'm like, it's just not adding up. She walks out of the cage into live, those connection numbers go to green because the magnitude of what happens to her body when live comes finishes the rest of it that I can see. And then all of a sudden, so knowing what right looks like a little bit sometimes, and that's why you have to take the information and let it help your eyes, allows me not to overcoach her by trying to get her numbers to match something in the cage when in game live, they already match up. And I'll give you an example too, is that, like, the numbers matter, okay? And they're not going to always correlate to success in an area. But if you take a kid who can hit and has some ability, I have a hitter who maybe didn't handle the ball away as good as she could, but I noticed lately her vertical bat angle is higher down and away than it's ever been. And guess what? She's starting to hit the ball down and away a lot better because her posture's getting to a spot and her ability to create a swing in that area has changed. So for me, it was a direct correlation because I start seeing her handle the ball away. So I put the sensor on to see if anything was different. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was that she was creating a little bit better angles down there.
How do you get the players to buy in to that process? And how do you get the players to understand that the check engine light is a piece that's not here to discourage you, but a piece to just acknowledge there's a little weakness here and let's attack it and let's make that a better part of your game?
Based on the kid, right? And I try to educate our kids on what makes them good. Like, one of my kids, I would say, doesn't ever get the green rotation, but she's going to out-hit everyone who does because her feel for timing and her ability to move in the right way and the way she sees things and recognize pitches is she doesn't need to be faster to the ball. You know what I'm saying? She is going, she's on every time. And there's other ones who, based on the way their style works, they're going to need to be able to accelerate things, in a different way, and it's based on style and player. So I try to educate them on what they do. But we also spend a huge amount of time on set up and start. Because I would say this to the coaches out here, I don't care what your numbers say, I don't care how good they are. Timing will disrupt and break every 1, 2, 3, 4, every great connection score, every great rotation score, every bit of everything. If they can't repeat moving on time, their swing is going to break down. And so with our kids, we understand that. And so we work from that part, and then we start understanding, like, when things can go wrong, or if things go wrong, we use the numbers as a checkpoint. If we're always at 50 with our connection, and then all of a sudden we're mishitting a lot of balls or things are changing and we go to the numbers and it's in red, then I can go back now and look at our load pattern and see where we may be breaking down or what's happening. They're starting to stand up in their posture a little bit. It's changing the way the bat's moving. And so now we're adjusting a little bit different. That could be from fatigue and all kind of things. So we pretty much just use Blast. I like to have as much live work with Blast as I can. So I get a checkpoint, but I have to document what happens when it's live so that we know what's really, really happening with the swing when the game starts. Because I see so many things change from practice to the game, right? And if we can identify what happens when the game's really going on, then it can kind of tell some stories about where the swing is going to break down. And over time, you can start building a pretty good data sheet about, okay, now I see why we have trouble in this zone. You know, in practice, we do a good job with our connection, but in game, the connection changes a whole lot in that area.
More than ever, in-game analytics is in front of us. We know at the travel ball level, you can use the sensor in-game and you can capture all different types of environments. This is super exciting. MLB is, obviously capturing in-game analytics. We get to see it every day. NCAA has approved in-game analytics, but the sensor has to be embedded into the bat. This is really cool. We're going to see in the next couple months, we're going to see some bat companies come out with some embedded bats. But what is really exciting about hearing you say this is talk to me about the importance. I mean, when you're in a practice environment, something that most coaches have really probably utilized from a Blast experience, a player feels so confident hitting off a tee. A player feels very comfortable getting that front toss. We don't have a sensor on the heart. We don't have a sensor on the brain. We're not measuring adrenaline. We're not measuring competitive spirit. Why do you think the benefits with in-game analytics, how do you think that's going to really help us evaluate our hitters and really create a whole new excitement movement for hitters in general with capturing these analytics?
In-game is real. And if you can measure something and get some feedback on what the body and swing is doing when the game really matters, I'm telling you, I've been to many colleges and I've watched hitters who are outstanding in the fall. And something about what they move that I saw, I'm like, this one's going to have a hard time. She doesn't move in balance enough. There's things that aren't going to add up when the game starts. But I'm watching this kid dominate in the fall. And I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Spring comes, doesn't add up. Yeah. And there's something that happens when the game comes on that changes.
How are you taking that fall player and how are you mentoring her to the springtime so that she can hit that high school drop?
If you can't start right and have a good out move, good luck. And so if there's things that stand out in that, I don't care what the numbers say. I don't care what a practice environment tells you. The game will destroy that. Like, I see it all the time. I've had conversations. I can give examples of all the data being collected in a practice environment, off a machine, all these great things, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and all these things that look right and work right, and it's beautiful. You put that same information on them in game in a live scrimmage environment, and all of a sudden, those numbers went all over the map. And it was one thing. When a hitter feels like sometimes they don't have enough time or the stress of a game literally destroyed their 1, 2, 3, 4 or their good swing mechanic. So if being able to capture that stuff in game over a long period of time, not a one-time thing, but being in game that's coming, being able to take a whole season and record that is going to give you some real answers about things. And you're going to get a real snapshot about what your swing actually does in the game.
We just launched our first player reports, which if you've been with Blast for a while, this is a new feature. And one thing that's really special about this is there's actually a live spray chart based on the environment. So if you are using T-work or you're using live front toss or you are in a game, you can now go into the app and mark each environment and log into the player reports. And why I think this is so amazing is because now we're allowing our hitters to see T swings matched with game swings. And so, Lincoln, what's your best advice for coaches that are now going to be able to measure different environments, and what's your advice to just digest the information and be able to apply that and not get so overwhelmed by it?
All right, can I start with this? Based on who you're
Yes.
coaching. If you're at a youth level and you're doing building, the T and the numbers that you get from there are really important because those are foundational things for kids who are just learning how to move, right? So the value of those numbers goes up in that setting because they have to build up some confidence in what their swing is doing from a tee to front toss, then to a live arm, and that, especially when you're in the building phases. As you start coaching older hitters and older players, you start trying to affect understanding the pieces of the swing that make it work. So finding out where it may be. There's a timing issue based on a load thing, and you can start putting a balance and move together that adds up the timing that gives them a better chance to repeat. Then when you start getting to that level, like how you use blast like the tee, and those things become more about honing things with your swing. And then as you get into a front toss and into a live environment, you start letting the numbers add up to the things that you know their swing quality is going to do, right? And so you're less prone to overcorrect or over manipulate a number unless there's a red flag. You let the numbers now kind of help form and shape what the hitter is or isn't.
Lincoln, I could talk to you all day, just tap into your brain, and I'm so grateful that you took the time for us, and I'm so glad that coaches get to hear you and hear your passion. And thank you. We are so happy to be a part of the NFCA this year. I wish we could be there in person, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I know that, Lincoln, you are out and about in the world, and is there a place that people can reach out to you directly if they'd like to learn more or tap into the Lincoln Martin brain?
Could always find me on Twitter at Top Tier Sports or Instagram.
There you go.
Send me a message.
Yes. Well, thank you, NFCA, for this great opportunity. Lincoln, thank you for sharing your passion with us. And we look forward to seeing you guys in person next year. Have a great rest of the day.